If you're a wrestling fan, you've probably seen a $300 wrestling t-shirt at a vintage store before. And when that happened, did you think to yourself, damn! How come old wrestling shirts are so popular and expensive right now? Wrestling fans and non-wrestling fans alike all seem to want these so bad, but I remember being bullied in middle school for wearing them. Even thrift stores like this Buffalo Exchange I'm at wants them. Can't believe they had a fucking Kofi Mania shirt. And that's because old wrestling shirts are making money. In fact, I'm sure you know the entire vintage clothing industry is on fire, in like a good way. It's even projected to grow exponentially by 2029. That includes every vintage item out there, yeah, from luxury brands to an I'm Your Poppy t-shirt from 2006. Wrestling is riding that wave. And they're in such high demand that you bet these prices are climbing. Wrestling tees found immense popularity in the 90s and early 2000s during the Attitude Era and the NWO's heyday. And like all trends, this one came right back around. It's 2025, new metal is kind of back, baggy pants are in again, and by default, wrestling merch is back. The odd part though is that this once semi-niche category post-Attitude Era is now coming back around to be cool again. In my early years of wrestling fandom, wearing a wrestling shirt in 2010 was not really the coolest thing to do. Fast forward to now though, and the Kardashians, among other celebrities and influencers, are wearing NWO shirts. But you know what they're not wearing? Current wrestling merch. There seems to be a huge divide here between vintage and modern wrestling shirts, with sometimes large price tags and cool factor versus somewhat lower prices and niche fandom. Sure, this is pervasive in every entertainment medium. For example, metal music shirts are also in a similar resurgence period right now and have been for a few years, but how has wrestling merch evolved over time and gotten to this weird point? I want to know. So I'm going to trace how it got there. So let's take it back to the 90s first. The Attitude Era boomed with demand for wrestling attire, with Stone Cold and The Rock by and large leading the pack. And the style, as you probably know, was nothing over the top. Usually a plain black t-shirt with a phrase on the front in white and a logo on the back. Nothing fancy there at all. Cheap as hell to produce, and they sold like crazy. It was a Vince McMahon wet dream. Those shirts were so popular and meant so much to fans though that they're still poking through the top merch sales on WWEshop today once in a while. I mean, I'm surprised Stone Cold Steve Austin has worked a single day in his life after retiring. The man apparently made $12 million from the 316 shirt in a single year. All that popularity in the 90s though is a stark contrast to the late 2000s and the early 2010s when, let's face it, if you were a kid in high school like me during that time, it was a bit shameful to wear and not very cool, as the shirt did indicate. But what on God's green earth could have even contributed to its cultural resurgence now? The answer: nostalgia. Although it appears wrestling has entered the mainstream again with record-breaking WrestleManias and live events, you'd be hard-pressed to find any non-wrestling fan wearing a current wrestling shirt. It's all from the time that wrestling was quote-unquote mainstream. In order to explain this point, I'd like to use a Venn diagram because fuck yeah, Venn diagrams. People with vintage shirts can really toe the line between hardcore fan, casual fan, or someone who barely knows anything at all about wrestling. It's kind of become a catch-all. The people that buy current merch though are those that actually attend shows and pay attention to the product on a week-by-week basis. And that's not at all a bad thing for the WWE, at least. WWE has never had a problem selling merchandise, ever. The company is a damn merch machine and constantly delivers numbers even beyond the nostalgia acts it has. Just for instance, Penta debuted on Raw earlier in 2025 and immediately became a top merch seller in the company for like a full week. The company just put all his merch on WWEshop and we're like, you won't buy this, you don't know this guy, he hasn't even debuted yet. And everyone was like, we are gonna buy it. We're gonna buy all of it. And they did. So there is a chance right now for newer stars to sell shirts by the boatload. That's not the problem. They just won't be selling it to the Kardashians anytime soon. Honestly, thank God. One big caveat to all this though is that there are actually lines of wrestling merch being made today that are also pretty damn expensive. That's what you get with sites like Chalkline, which still 100% draw upon nostalgia for their designs, but for modern and current wrestlers, there doesn't seem to be as much of a buzz. And that's likely because the people who are old enough to afford and be nostalgic over this stuff didn't exactly grow up on Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. They grew up on the Attitude and New Generation eras and even prior to that. Another modern wrestling shirt I can point to that really set a standard for adult wrestling wear caught steam in Japan, of all places. I can draw tons of similarities from the Attitude Era boom to a smaller scale in 2016 to 2019 when Bullet Club was the hottest thing in wrestling outside of the WWE. the best of times. Unlike the 90s and early 2000s though, Bullet Club tees were way more niche down with their audience, but this mild boom in new wrestling merch had to be noted for the video as a major breakthrough in modern merch sales because, come on, it was crazy. But okay, so what's my big point through all this big old back and forth? My point is, wrestling merch, it's kind of weird. Might be one of the only mediums out there where current iterations of its merch are for a completely different segment of its audience than vintage merch. The only other comparison I can make is just music in general. Rock music, metal music, R&B, you know, like all those shirts that say like Aaliyah on them from like the, I don't know. You know the ones. I'll put up a picture. If you see someone wearing a wrestling shirt that's clearly from the 1990s, they could be the hardcorest of hardcore fans, a casual fan, Tommy Dreamer, a lapsed fan, or a complete poser. You just can't really tell anymore. All in all, more wrestling shirts is a good thing. But man, the price tag is kind of tough to look at if you're an actual fan. Either way, wear the merch you like, and just be prepared for me to come up to you and start yapping to you about it. It's the natural way of things. But in the meantime, I must bid you adieu, so goodbye, mwah, and good night.
Ooh, chavo!